2025, as we have seen, has been the year of the Ingenieur. Last year, we got the year of refined movement, stuff like the Eternal Calendar, which was wild. And the year before that, we had Ingenieurs. So they missed a year, but now they've released a batch of Ingenieurs that are absolutely incredible. And my opinion is that the highlight in terms of craftsmanship lies in this Ingenieur. This is the new IWC Ingenieur Perpetual Calendar 41 with the reference number IW344903. This is the first stainless steel Ingenieur to combine the new Ingenieur design with Kurt Klaus's legendary Perpetual Calendar. Okay, so firstly, let's get into what a perpetual calendar actually is, and then we'll start covering the specs and everything else you need to know. The perpetual calendar is basically mechanically programmed to recognize the different month lengths, and it adds a leap day every 4 years at the end of February, and that is what we call a leap year. It can be adjusted via the crown without the need for additional pushers at the sides. Now, this innovation from IWC is actually pretty special because it's the first time we've seen a perpetual calendar in the Ingenieur range, the new Ingenieur range. And it just goes to show, it kind of proves that the Ingenieur isn't this sporty 70s inspired hype watch, but actually it's more of a refined piece of craftsmanship. I also think the black ceramic 42mm is a refined piece of craftsmanship, if I'm totally honest. I think that's awesome. The way that they've built that, the way that they've manufactured that is so cool. But we cover that in a different video. So if you guys want to see the other reviews of the new Ingenieur ranges or the new models from Watches and Wonders in general, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Right, so on with the specs. This model comes in at 41.6mm in diameter. So it is that little bit larger than 41mm. But I think that's partially because it's got so much brilliance in that perpetual calendar movement shoved into it. I wouldn't say this model wears too large. It doesn't wear too big on the wrist, but it is definitely that little bit more bulky than the original Ingenieur 40, and you'll feel the extra heft on that watch when you get it on the wrist. And I would highly advise getting any of these watches on the wrist because, as I've said in tons of other videos, the renders online look nothing like the watches in person. It's actually quite freaky. The thickness on this model comes in at 13.5mm. So yes, it is that little bit thicker than the Ingenieur that we know and love, but that's because of the movement in this model, and the movement we'll get onto in a second. This model comes in at 46.9mm in diameter, is water resistant to 100 meters or 10 bar. It has a blue dial and a stainless steel bracelet with a butterfly clasp. Now, the bracelet and the butterfly clasp is exactly the same as we've seen from other IWC Ingenieur models. I love it. It's very refined. It's very IWC, shall we say. There's nothing much to comment on that because it is essentially the same as the older versions. Now, this watch has a beautiful blue dial, and as you can see, it has 3 sub-dials, which are in a different texture to the rest of the dial. So on the rest of the dial, or the main bit of the dial, you see it has that teak, kind of squared off texture that we know from the IWC range. But in the sub-dials, it's more of a glossy, kind of shiny finish without that depth. And it actually gives it a good contrast and makes it that little bit easier to read. Now, at the 3 o'clock mark, you have the date. At the 6 o'clock mark, you have the month. And at the 3 o'clock mark, you have the day. Aside from that, you have the minutes and the hours, and you might notice that the seconds hand is actually missing. Now, when you flip this watch over, you actually have an open case back, and that seems to be a new thing from the IWC Ingenieur range, is opening up that case back so that we can see into the movement. And that's a trait in a watch that I absolutely like. It's actually a make or break to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think if you can't see into the beating heart of your watch, it's an immediate red flag. Whereas when you can see the mechanics, when you can see the cogs turning, it ticking, it's like the beating heart of your watch. It's almost like having a car that you can't open the bonnet when it has a closed case back. Why would you not want to see what's going on inside? So I am all for the fact that they're bringing out open case backs in these Ingenieurs, and I do think that in the future, that's going to be something that's rolled out to more and more watches. Behind this open case back, you have the caliber 82600. This is an IWC manufactured caliber with 60 hours of power. Overall, I'm actually really excited about this watch. To be honest, the black dial Ingenieur and this are what stole the show for me from IWC. The black dial because of the innovation around the ceramic. Again, I did another video on that. You can go onto the channel and see that. And this model because of the innovation around the movement. Getting this new movement and putting it into a brand new watch is much more exciting to me than just changing a dial color. And I feel like so often in the industry now, a dial color is all that they change, or a second-hand color, some lining of detail that isn't actually that significant in the grand scheme of things. But this update, this Perpetual Calendar, is significant. It marks a moment in time, it marks a moment in history. Now on the wrist, this watch does wear that little bit more chunky than the IWC Ingenieur 40, but I would by no way, shape or means say that it's too much. Now my wrist's coming at 6.5 inches and I do think this wears pretty well. It's probably on the cusp of getting that little bit too big, but it doesn't touch that point just yet. What do you guys think of this new release of the Ingenieur? Remember that we're going to be reviewing all the new IWC lines as well as all the other watch brands that are at Watches and Wonders, so make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to see them. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Harrison, as always, because I forgot to say that at the, at the beginning. And yeah, I'll see you guys in probably an hour at Watches and Wonders. It's crazy. It's actually mental. It's wild. See you soon.